Hi everyone, it's Dee Dee. Welcome to Feed Mind Body Souls 30 Days to Feeling Fabulous 2020. I am so excited to have you guys participate in this journey with me, alongside me. A lot of you, this is the third year you'll be doing it, and that is amazing to me. It's really humbling to have you back for the third time, and thank you again for trusting me with your health. And to all you newbies out there, use the people that have gone through this program. Post questions to the Facebook group. Let them know what you're going through. A lot of them have already been there. So they can even help me out a bit in terms of going through this journey. So just a few housekeeping items to get started. As you know, we do have a closed Facebook group that you're watching this through. So I wanted to make sure that we're leveraging it in the right way. Please, if you have a question specifically for me, tag me at FeedMBS. So I don't miss it. A lot of times if you just type the question, I might miss it. There's a lot coming at me this month. And that said, I would truly appreciate if people would respect that, this is probably the main best channel of communication for me. So if you at all possible can avoid texting, emailing, DMing. Well, I love talking to each and every one of you. If all of you do that, I just will lose things, and I won't be able to get my regular day job done, which is seeing my one-on-one clients. So I do check the Facebook group often, but again, I do see clients still during the day. So I check when I can, but then I also respect what I practice what I preach a bit in terms of I turn off my phone 2 hours before bed. And all my friends know I'm an early bird, so I go to bed at 10 at the latest usually. So I try and put my phone away at 8. So please understand that, and you guys should too. So I hope you take that information. So today we're going to jump in. I'm going to talk about this week's topic, which is inflammation. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. All right. And so you should be seeing my presentation. I am going to put it in presentation mode for you all. Okay, so here we go. Last year we talked a lot about hormones, but this year we're going to focus a little more on inflammation. You still have access to last year's presentation. I'm going to link them in the email so you can go back and view them, and I strongly encourage you do. But today we're going to, and today and throughout the 30 days, I'm going to weave this subject of inflammation throughout a lot of the topics. We're going to talk about a ton of things, but I do feel inflammation is a good topic to focus on this year. So just wanted to give you at least a brief overview today about what we'll be talking about in terms of inflammation and what inflammation actually is. So the fundamentals of inflammation, there's actually two types of inflammation. The first one, acute inflammation, is absolutely necessary and life-saving. So, when you cut yourself, think of yourself when you cut yourself with a knife, what happens? There's a response to that injury. The platelets rush in, they create kind of a barrier trying to form that scab so, the wound can heal. And then at the same time, you have the white blood cells rushing in to fight off infection. That's an absolutely necessary life-saving response. You often see pain, redness, immobility, swelling, heat. All those things are very typical of inflammation, acute inflammation, and that's part of the process and part of the healing process. But what has happened even a lot more so recently is that people are struck in this chronic inflammation phase. What happens is that acute inflammation just never goes away, and that flame persists, and it turns into something called chronic inflammation, where white blood cells actually end up doing some damage. They end up attacking healthy tissues surrounding an area and causing more inflammation that doesn't go away. And what happens? Well, 45 to 60% of adult Americans have a chronic disease state. Pretty scary. And then when I say chronic disease state, this is anything from like type 2 diabetes to our number one killer, heart disease, to even some cancers are being blamed as inflammation. So inflammation is really at the core of so many chronic diseases these days. And it's really scary when you hear that 50 to 81% of Americans are on a daily prescription, and that's over the age of 12. So even our youth are taking a daily prescription for something, whether it be an inflammatory arthritis, diabetes, it could be, heart disease, anything. But they even coined a new term recently. I don't know if you've heard something called inflammation. So that's a combination of inflammation and aging, inflammaging. That means that a lot of us are actually feeling older than we might be. So those aches and pains at young ages, starting maybe in your 20s, or maybe your cells, are not producing enough energy. They're not producing those mitochondria that I'll talk about in one of my posts are injured and not producing the necessary energy. or you're actually looking older than you are, which is definitely not something we want to see happening. So that is inflammaging, and kind of a scary term that we want to be aware of. So as a holistic practitioner, what's always important to me is to understand what's at the root cause of that inflammation. Not just that it's, we treat it symptomatically, when you go to that doctor and they fix that sprained ankle, but if it's something that's chronic, you need to understand what's at the root of it and what it's, what is continuing and why it's perpetuating. So food is obviously one that I'm going to dive into in a couple of slides. Leaky gut. I don't know if everyone here has heard of that, but that's something that holistic practitioners and functional medicine doctors are big on, and I've done a lot of research on it because it's very tied to my condition, which is autoimmunity. Maybe a lot of conventional doctors aren't bought into it as much, but basically what it means when you have a leaky gut is that the tight junctions in your intestines, which should fit together kind of really tightly, kind of are pulled apart, and all these toxins and microbes and undigested food particles can get into your bloodstream and wreak total havoc on your system. So, gut is one of our top, places where disease can start. So we want to make sure our gut is functioning well. Hippocrates, I know you've probably heard me quote that, all disease begins in the gut, and truly is the case in a lot of situations. So lifestyle, being sedentary, our desktop days and our Netflix nights, as I call them, that causes our lymphatic system to become stagnant, and our lymphatic system clears out our toxins. It's kind of like the garbage truck that goes through and takes out the garbage. When we're not moving, that becomes very stagnant. Stress and the chronic cortisol, creating hormonal havoc on our systems, and actually that tears apart your gut as well. Stress, food and mood, you'll hear about that more in Stress Week, are tightly connected. Poor sleep, shift work, all of these create inflammation by raising that cortisol level. Our toxic environment, so pollution, chemicals, heavy metals, pesticides, medications, all these things we face on a daily basis. A lot of it we can't control, a lot of it we can. So it's just important to be aware of what we can control and do something about it. Infections, things like Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr virus, H. pylori, E. coli. A lot of these things can really, kind of burrow in and last for a very long time unless we finally kick them to the curb. But these, bacterial or viral infections are things we always need to be aware of. Genetics and hereditary. One thing I really found fascinating, I remember when I was in class, is just learning about, genetic mutations and how things like, think of the Irish potato famine, or, people, Auschwitz survivors after World War II, when they do testing on their DNA and they see that how that stress impacts not only for the generation that experienced it, but for generations following it, and how it can alter the genetic makeup of an individual. So, sometimes you're not at fault, but maybe sometimes you can just blame your parents. So where does inflammation show up in the body? It really can show up in so many different places, in so many different ways. This is just a few of them, but I just wanted to kind of highlight to you what inflammatory conditions look like in different areas. So cognitive, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. In our detoxification systems, I don't know if a lot of you have heard of something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. 85 to 90 million Americans experience this. And it's where, you actually have like cirrhosis of the liver, but you're not a big drinker. It's just toxic buildup in your liver, which is our main detoxification organ. Immune system, that's autoimmunity, that is kind of skyrocketing these days. Gastrointestinal, so a lot of people with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel disease, Crohn's, colitis, all of those things are inflammatory. Cardiovascular disease, #1 killer in America. Heart disease, musculoskeletal, arthritis and osteoarthritis, and different arthritic conditions. Itis means inflammation. Hormonal system, so a lot of women have conditions like endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids. All of those are inflammatory conditions, and even diabetes can be thrown into that category as an inflammatory condition. So that's how inflammation can manifest throughout the different body systems. And again, there's just so many opportunities for that chronic inflammation to take place. But no, I don't want to be total Debbie Downer, as some people can say that I can be at times. So I want to give you the positive spin on it, and what can we truly do to control that inflammation. Well, you may have heard me say, let's ditch the sad crap. That's the number one thing we can do in controlling our food. And that's what we do through this 30-day plan. So that sad crap, the standard American diet full of chemicals, refined sugar, alcohol, and processed foods, that's what we're taking away for the 30 days. We're going to clean up our act here. We're removing all the top inflammatory foods, gluten, dairy, processed oils, GMO, sugar. Now, as you probably heard me say too, anyone can be sensitive to anything. So, you may be allergic to strawberries and spinach. So you're going to have to take control yourself and remove those foods that do not sit well with you. I can't remove everything specifically. And if you have a specific condition, some of you may even need to follow things like removing nightshades, removing lectins, going on a low FODMAP diet, a SIBO diet. There's so many different variations. I mean, there's, 7 billion people and there's 7 billion different needs in terms of dietary needs. So please, use your head, see how foods make you feel, use the tracker, and that will help you identify foods that may not sit well with you. If you think that kale is the healthiest thing, there's people that have a sensitivity to kale and can't digest it. So, using a tracker will help you kind of identify maybe those individual food sensitivities. So how else we control inflammation? Understand that inflammation often starts in the gut. So, we work to heal our guts, and that how we do that is through supplementation, eating nutritious foods, controlling stress. There's a lot that goes into that. Eating healthy fats, supplementing with high quality fish oil is anti-inflammatory. Eating in a calm and relaxed state, not staring at our phones, not staring at our computers that might trigger us with some kind of stress reaction while we're eating. Cooking veggies makes them easier to digest for a lot of people that have a lot of issues with a lot of raw veg. Cooking them makes them easier to digest, especially blending them when you break them down makes it much easier to digest. Going organic when possible. You don't need to spend money on organic onions and garlic, but yes, you do need to spend money on organic strawberries and spinach. Detoxifying on a regular basis. I know somebody that has a twice yearly detox, and I am a huge believer in it because we're just overwhelmed with toxins today. So I do practice that, and I try and do mini detoxes in different ways throughout my week, maybe an infrared sauna, going for a jog, going to get a massage, drinking green juice. There's lots of different ways we can detoxify on a daily basis. Taking the right supplements, that's going to be individualized. Avoiding unnecessary medication, maybe going without that antibiotic if it's not necessary. Cleaning up our environment, minimizing plastic, not using, using clean beauty products, installing water filters. Getting restorative sleep, making sure that we're having a consistent sleep and wake time, and we'll dive deep into that during sleep week and how important that is. Don't sit for too long. Again, we got to move that lymph system. We got to get it moving, and staring at a computer for 8 hours a day is just not doing anybody any good. So avoiding elevated cholesterol, that's your stress hormone. So we need to make sure that we're managing our stress levels and taking an active role in doing so. Is that meditation? Is it going for a walk outside? Is it reading? Is it journaling? This is different for everyone. Not everyone feels comfortable meditating. Maybe you're walking meditated, maybe walking meditation is best for you, maybe journaling, but taking at least one of those practices into your daily life to control your cortisol and stress levels. So this is something that maybe you just print out and bring to your doctor. I don't want to get too sciencey, but what I tell a lot of my clients is test, don't guess. Go to your doctor and get the right testing information. So these are fantastic tests to take to your doctor. Most of them are run pretty regularly and should be part of an annual exam. So I love C-reactive protein. It's just a measure of systemic inflammation in the body. Homocysteine, same, and especially in terms of cardiovascular disease. Ferritin is a measure of stored iron in your blood, but also if it's high, that can mean there's something going on inflammatory-wise. There's a lot of GI tests that can be done if you're having gut issues. Something called MTHFR, it's the mother effer gene testing that I tell my clients. That actually, like 30 to 40% of the population has that genetic defect. I am one of them. It means I don't methylate well, meaning I don't detoxify well. So I have to support that. APOE4 and APOA2. Maybe if you have these, the proteins that metabolize fat, maybe if you show that you don't you wouldn't do well on a keto diet. So it's important to know that if you can metabolize fat well, because if you're on a keto diet and you don't metabolize fat well, you're going to end up with some major issues. So that's important to know. And then LPPLA2, in terms of, kind of showing your